everyone! In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the second episode of the second season of Shadowhunters named A Door in the Dark. So I think overall, this episode was a lot worse content-wise. There were quite a few things about the plot that sort of bothered me, but I have to say that overall, the dialogue between the characters was a lot better than the first episode. I felt like the lines were funnier, I felt like the lines were more genuine, I felt like the lines were so much more meaningful. I also felt like the conversations and the dialogue that happened between the characters was just so much more on point with the characters that we know from the books. However, because there was certain things that just really bothered me, I'd have to say that this episode was overall just like slightly worse than the first episode, although it wasn't super bad. I still very much enjoyed it. I'd be giving this episode maybe a B-. So it wasn't too bad, but I think that's all I can say for the non-spoiler section. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, then you should go back, watch it, and then you should come back and we can discuss it together. Bye! So the pacing. I know a lot of people complained about the pacing. It was quite fast-paced, so the scenes were very short, the scenes sort of switched back and forth. I felt like some of the time it kind of bothered me a tiny bit. Then on the other hand, I felt like the pacing sort of divided the episode up and kind of made it more sort of absorbable. It was easier to follow, it wasn't super chunky, as in it wasn't that you had a big chunk here and a big chunk here and it was sort of just like, it was a bit boring, but it sort of went back and forth between the characters, and while I can see why that would bother certain people, I actually don't think it's too bad, especially because in the books there are certain chapters where, you know, it switches between different characters in the scenes, and so I felt like that was quite keeping with the books and it wasn't all too weird for me. I think it would be nice if they included a few scenes that were a bit longer, but overall I would say the pacing is actually better than the first episode and also better than the episodes in the first season. The second thing I really want to comment on is Valentine. Valentine's lines in the first season were a bit cheesy, they were a bit weird, they were a bit sort of like villainesque, stereotypical, and I felt like in this episode, his lines just seemed so genuine. The way that he talked to Jace about the Downworlders, the way that he sort of convinced people that Downworlders were a threat to the Shadowhunters society, it was just very, very Valentine. You could just really tell that his hatred for the Downworlders and his hatred for the Clave were just really, really genuine. I thought that was just really great to see. Now, another thing that I really want to mention, and I don't know if anyone else picked up on this, but I liked how in the flashback where Jocelyn is carrying baby Jonathan, I was happy to see that they didn't include a younger actress that looks absolutely nothing like Jocelyn like they did in the first season, but that they actually kept Jocelyn's actress and sort of just made her look a bit younger. On the other hand, however, that scene was completely weird. I think that it was really interesting seeing Jonathan as a baby, and it was very interesting seeing him have these black eyes, but I felt like it was really unnecessary to have him sort of reach out to grab a flower and it to sort of shrivel up and die. I understand that that's a very unusual and sort of weird and freakish thing to happen, but I don't necessarily think that it quite shows his sort of evil personality. Like, Jocelyn was sort of like, yeah, and that's when I knew that Jonathan was evil, but I don't really think that what happened really sort of showed the depth of Jonathan's evilness. It was quite sort of cringy. However, moving on from that, I'd like to talk about the positive stuff. I think that pretty much every scene on here in the episode, despite what the plot was, despite the weird storyline things that were happening, I thought that the dialogue was so real. The first scene that I really enjoyed was the scene between Alec and Clary. I think in the first season it was made quite obvious that Alec doesn't like Clary very much and that he blames her for a lot of the things that happened, but I don't think that it was really understood just how deep that sort of distrust and sort of hatred went with Alec. It wasn't portrayed as dark and as sort of gritty as it was in the books, and it was just really nice to see him step up and sort of talk about his feelings and be angry with her. And then seeing Izzy come and take Clary's side and sort of defend her was also just like a really nice thing to see. On the other hand, Izzy and Clary's scene was also so nice. I think I'd have to say that that was probably my favorite scene from the whole episode because it just felt so genuine, and I really loved that scene. I loved how Izzy was comforting Clary, especially that part where Clary said, "I'm just a girl who went out to celebrate her birthday and returned with a gift that I can't return." And then Izzy says, "It's not a gift, it's a blessing." And that just sort of really hit me because I know Shadowhunters take their sort of abilities very seriously, and Clara obviously has been thrown into this world under sort of dire and sort of shitty circumstances, and Izzy is sort of there to comfort her, to sort of build her back up, to tell her that, look, there is a positive side to this, and you know, you do have a target on your back, but you can make the most of it. And that was really great to see. I also really liked Alec and Izzy's scenes. I liked seeing them work together. It was interesting to see them going out on a mission on their own without Jace and seeing them sort of interact with each other as brother and sister. It was something we didn't see very often in season 1, and it was really great. I really loved dialogue between Simon and Magnus. I thought that the two of them together were just absolutely hilarious. I thought it was a bit unnecessary that Simon had to go all the way to India to find Camille, but nevertheless, I thought the scene was very funny. Simon, you know, being his sort of goofy, kind of very bad vampire self, it was very humorous. I especially loved how Magnus was like, oh, when he picked up the vase and he was like, oh, this is mine, after one of my many breakups with Camille, and then he goes away and he tries to find all the other stuff that is still lying around that belongs to him. I thought that was a funny addition because it kind of shows the humor of, you know, Magnus and Camille dating like hundreds of years ago, like on, off, you know, it's a thing that is mentioned in the books at times, but it was just really nice to see that kind of tidbit of information. I also thought the scene with Simon and the snake, while it was a tiny bit cringy at the end, I would say it was quite funny, especially when Magnus comes and he's like, oh yeah, that's my baby, and then Simon's like, what? Now, another thing I really liked was that the portal travel has changed. First of all, I wanted to say that I very much appreciate the fact that they're not this like purple swirling magic thing that's just like lying like just sort of hanging in the air, but that they've really changed them to like the sort of dark vortex that you kind of get sucked into. It was also really great to see Simon feeling a bit nauseous after portal travel, because in the first season it seemed like portal travel was really easy. You sort of just disintegrate and then you appear on the other side. It was just also very funny when he managed to get to India with Magnus and he was like, portal traveling isn't really my thing. Is there a YouTube tutorial I can watch? That was just very Simon-esque again, and that was just, it was great. Alberto just has the best lines in this show. I think we can all agree on that. I would have to say though, one of the best aspects of this episode was Clary. Clary's acting has vastly improved. I already said that it improved in episode 1, but I would have to say that this time she was so on point and she was so in character. She literally embodied Clary. I thought it was just great to see her leaving her stele on her bed and going back to the art academy. It was also very interesting when they sort of had this shot of her walking through the crowds of New York and having her hair sort of stand out with her vibrant colors. Illustrated kind of, you know, what happens when you become aware of the Shadowhunter world and then you go back to the mundane world. You can still be part of the mundane world, but everything is gonna look, you know, dull in comparison to what you've been through. It was also very great to see her painting her picture. I think it's very important to show people delving back into their hobbies and things that they love, even in times of very bad circumstances. It was really great to see her just go back and try to be a mundane, especially the line that she says to her mother, I'm not a mundane, I'm not a Shadowhunter, I am nothing. I think that really brings into focus just how hopeless and distressed Clary is feeling. She doesn't know what to do with herself. That's made very clear in the books, but I felt like in the first episode she gets sucked into the Shadowhunter world and she can almost basically do everything from the start. She gets her runes, she uses seraph blades, she becomes a part of the team, she becomes part of missions, and it just never really showed her sort of struggling to fit in, struggling for her to find her balance in life, and it was just a really nice addition to this episode. Now, however, I need to go into some details about things that I didn't like. So if you very much enjoyed this episode, I would suggest you leave because I'm gonna be pulling out a lot of shit from this episode. First of all, I hate how the producers just sort of pluck out random runes that don't exist in the Shadowhunter world and just sort of put them in the show for no reason whatsoever. So, rune number 1, the flashback rune. We saw this in the first episode of season 1 when Valentine was trying to show Jace that he injected him with demon blood in Jocelyn's womb, but it was very unnecessary. Obviously, it brings more of a sort of visual aspect to the show. It was just adding another dimension to the Shadowhunter magic that there isn't. It would have been so much better if Valentine would have just told Jace, and then while he's telling him, we would have gotten this sort of visual flashback of what happened during that time. Now, the shape-shifting rune. I don't know what I can say about this. Like, whose idea was it to put a shape-shifting rune into this show? I have to say that I think every time they've used the shape-shifting rune, it was unnecessary. It was unnecessary when Lydia came into the Institute for the first time and tried to make herself look like Valentine. It was unnecessary when Valentine was trying to confuse Jace about being his father. It was also unnecessary when Valentine was confusing Jace on the ship when Jace was trying to escape. And it was also unnecessary when Clary wanted to escape the Institute in the first episode and disguised herself as Aldertree. Unnecessary. Why do you have to add this other rune to the Shadowhunter world that doesn't exist. The Shadowhunter rune's abilities aren't limitless. There has to be a limit somewhere. It would have made a lot more sense if Valentine wouldn't have used a rune to make himself look way different. First of all, it makes no sense for that rune to have kept up its properties over the course of a decade when he was raising Jace. Second of all, it would have made much more sense for him to have gotten a potion from a warlock or something. I'm not entirely sure whether the warlocks in the books are able to make people look different to who they are, but I think that would have been a lot more on point with the kind of abilities that warlocks and Shadowhunters have. I don't like the fact that they are treating the Shadowhunter runes as sort of like an endless supply of possibilities. That's not what magic is supposed to be like. Magic has its limits, magic has its rules, and that also applies to the Shadowhunter runes. And I can't express just how annoyed I am that they added it in. The ending of this episode was extremely strange. First of all, what is this whole piece of Adamas that, you know, Alec can use to track Jace? Where is that ever mentioned? Why did they mention that Luke's sister was an Iron Sister? That was something that was revealed in the last book of the Mortal Instrument series. I also don't like how they're expanding upon sort of like the parabatai bond. I think that Emma Brooks made a great point when she said that the more they add on to it, it's sort of the more it loses its meaning. It was meaningful enough when they were just two Shadowhunters, that they had a great connection, that they were brothers and that they loved each other. There was no need to add this whole I can feel him and he can feel me and this whole like parabatai bond tracking. It was just, it sort of takes away from the depth and the love between two parabatai. I don't even want to go into the part where Clary gets abducted by Dot. First of all, why is Dot alive? It's very, very strange to have her appear so suddenly. She looks very creepy with her like veins in her face. It was also extremely strange when she made Clary believe that she could see the future. I really don't know what to say about the ending of the episode. It was great to see Jace fight his way away from Valentine's men, but other than that, I didn't like the ending. It was very, very fast. A lot of things happened suddenly. I felt like they tried to just pack so much content into those last 10 minutes. It made no sense to me. I think if the last 10 minutes of the episode would have been different, I think I would have enjoyed this episode a lot more. I think that this episode just sort of went to hell when Dot showed up to abduct Clary. It still had some interesting parts of it. It was also sweet to see Dot's sort of sympathetic and kind side when she was in the cage, sort of trying to ask Dot to release her and to not like brainwash her again. But then again, I don't understand why she had to get brainwashed in the first place. It was very, very strange. So I think those were my thoughts for this episode. I don't think there's anything much else I can say about it. I'm interested in seeing what happens in episode 3. I am interested in seeing how this whole Adamas thing turns out with Alec. You could see that he was having some sort of seizure. There's something going on with him. And I also know that they cast, forgot her name, but Luke's sister, the Iron Sister, was cast. So presumably we're gonna get to know the Iron Sisters and see more about their world. I find it extremely unnecessary. I think they're adding a lot of devices to the Shadowhunter world that are just really unnecessary. I think the storyline on its own from the books already has a lot of depth and plot to it. I think that they're packing it too full. I feel like instead of spreading this show out over a nice like 6 seasons, they're sort of smushing it all together. I am very hopeful for this season. Unfortunately, I think that episode 2 was a bit weaker than episode 1. But I can already see the improvements over season 1. That obviously makes me hopeful for the next couple of episodes. And also we're getting new writers starting from episode 4 or 5. I'm not sure which ones, but I'm also hoping that once they switch writers, the dialogue and the storyline and the plot and everything will improve. And hopefully then I will be able to spurt more positive things out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts were. Let me know what you guys liked or disliked. I'm very interested to hear you guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! We could be